to a point where it didn't go viral anymore. And when I was in the Maldives and I thought, okay, what magic trick can I do? And I did that one again, it blew up more than ever before. So suddenly the interest was back for that. But I wouldn't have known that if I didn't think of the analytics from a time longer ago. So I always say, do keep in mind what has worked in the past. But also, as I just said, for me, it's a little more important to look at what's working now, because you might, a lot of the times I've done this as well, you might take a little bit of posting content, come back and try to continue as you were a month or two ago, and you might notice a difference. So it's very important to have a look at what's working now.
I love that. And I also think that, you're speaking to something in terms of, for instance, when as a creator, you get into like a bit of a a creative, slump. So being able to zoom out and look at your content in terms of, like you were saying, you went back to a trick that you'd been doing for a while, but it hadn't necessarily picked up. It also helps you in terms of inspiring you of, ideas of what to do. All right, now we're going to talk to patterns, right? Across or similarities across content. Has there been any similarities or patterns that you have observed in terms of your content and seeing that, my content is performing better at a certain time of the year, or just any patterns just in general?
Yeah, so I would agree with what we've heard earlier. To me, timing has never been, or the specific time to post has never been such a big deal. I have tried every single time, right, to a point where I've believed that late afternoon is the best, because from what I've learned is, or from what I've experienced, perhaps that's the time when everyone's home. That's the time everyone wants to watch. Something I have noticed is when I look at Thursday afternoons, Friday afternoons, I have gotten great results. However, a lot of people who I've spoken to have not seen any results during those days. In fact, they say those are their worst days, which is strange considering we're making the same content. So what I've noticed recently, and I have to agree with what was said earlier, I think the algorithm is getting a lot better. I think that whenever I post a video that is good enough, it tends to go viral. You have a feeling when you're posting something, when you're watching it just before you post, like, okay, this is one of the best things I've ever done, right? There's still the likelihood of it not going viral, but more than not, that's going to be the best performing video. And sometimes we have a feeling for that. And I can post that at any random time, and I would notice, okay, it's still picking up. I think it does reach out to the correct people, regardless of time, even if it might take them 6 hours before they see the video. But I know that in my own experience, that's what I've noticed. But yes, I have looked out for certain patterns. As an example, as I just said to you, Thursdays and Fridays, I have noticed sometimes a big reach, but sometimes I might post on a Monday and it might do better than ever before. But I do tend to stick to later week just because of how it has been always, and there might still be something there. Other patterns, as I've mentioned before, is just looking at what's doing good, what's performing good at the moment. Because sometimes it might sound like a very easy task to just look at what's doing good. But if you're like me and you believe in posting a lot of content, if you're posting 7 or 8 times a day, it's very easy after 4 or 5 days to forget about the content from a week ago. And then one day, I'm sure this has happened to all of us, one day you just scroll through and you're like, wow, what happened with this video? And you completely forgot about it. And if you didn't scroll back, you wouldn't have known. So I think it's important to look out for that, because if you do happen to hit something that does very, very well, something I strongly believe in, which I'm actually very frustrated that I only learned recently, is when something does do that good, do the same thing, not 100% the same. But for instance, if that popcorn trick did well, why don't I do it again with something else or at a different place? And when I've done that, now I see the results. It's very strange, and it just shows you that it does happen. Like, you would go viral with the popcorn video, you would do okay, and then when you post a video like that again it blows up. So that just proves that if we ever feel like you're in a rut and nothing's working, if you can figure it out, it can absolutely work. And it doesn't mean that when things are going down that it's going to stay down. You just need to look out for these types of things.
Yeah, so interesting. I'm even often seen, you know, when a creator, for instance, their video goes viral and you somehow see this content being shared everywhere else, and you actually go to that creator's page and you see that they have multiple iterations of that. Idea. It's just that, this specific one happened to blow up, or multiple ones have actually blown up in different, ways, which is so interesting, actually. All right,
Yeah, if
now
I
we're
could
gonna,
just,
yeah,
sorry.
go on.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that's so true. I mean, you'll notice that all the time. Someone goes viral and you're like, wow, how lucky. But then when you go to look at their profile, you see they've been doing that certain thing for a while. This was just the one that people were interested in. And sometimes the older ones are even better, but this was the one that got the correct reach. So sometimes just stick to something. If you know it's a good idea, just stick to it. That's the advice I give. Perfectly said, for sure.
Love it, love it, love it. And then moving on to outliers, right? How important? I mean, sorry. What have you learned in terms of the content that hasn't done well? Because a lot of creators, when they do their content and then maybe it doesn't perform well, they get demotivated and maybe even stop. Are there any from that? And do you compare your content, ones that's done well versus one that hasn't done well?
Yes, I absolutely do compare that. I know sometimes we say, well, you have to make what you love. And although I agree completely with that, make the type of content you love making. But at the end of the day, if I'm talking about the new watch that I just bought, that's obviously something I'd love to talk about. I just got the watch. I want to tell people about it. I don't have a watch, by the way. It's just an example. um, so although that is very interesting to me, it might not be very interesting to my audience. So, what I always say is, do take into consideration how entertaining this is, how valuable it is. I talked about something having value earlier.
To your long form videos. If it feels like you're entering a new genre, maybe it does belong on a separate channel. But I've tried to align my shorts with my longs, therefore it kind of brings in the same kind of audience.
Exactly. And I think we're actually close to the time. This goes by so fast. Yeah, I wanted to, I guess, just to finish this off, any other tips, nuggets of wisdom that you would like to leave our creators with before we go back to our separate hangouts?
You are putting me on the spot here.
That's what I'm here for.
I guess my most recent best finding is try to be a human, right? So it's easy to get too lost in the data to the point where you're like optimizing the fun out of things is the way I would put it, right? You're trying to make your videos so technically proficient that you forget there are people watching on the other end, and people like jokes and BTS and outtakes and things like that. So we're trying to integrate those more natural moments within our videos more and more. And I'd recommend you do the same.
I love that. Such a wonderful message to finish off this section of our hangout. Thank you so much, Arun, for joining us here today. I'm sure everyone has loved to hear from you. And best of luck with your channel. I'm sure we'll continue to see amazing content coming from you. So thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.